Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience and thank you for joining us for this webinar, Back to School Support and Resources for MyMath K-5. My name is Sarah Shaja and I'm Marketing Manager at McGraw Hill based in Dubai. You must have joined our sessions earlier, and before we go on any further, I'm just going to check if the audio connection is all right so you can hear my voice, everything is okay. On your screens on the right side, you should be able to see a hand icon. Can you please press on the hand icon if you can hear my voice? It should be just below your name. Okay, brilliant, brilliant. Lots of hands going up. So we're clear on the audio. I'll give you a brief overview of the session today. This is an implementation training session for MyMath K-5. So if you teach grades K-5 and are using MyMath in the upcoming academic year, this session is for you. You'll learn about teaching strategies and how you can redesign your classroom. We are absolutely delighted to have Beth Miner join us today. Thank you, Beth, for joining us.
Thank you.
You've got moderators for this session, so my colleague Afsana and Ahmed will be here to moderate the session for you. We'll be looking after your questions and queries. So if you have any questions, you can type them up in the Q&A box. And if you want to chat or you want to present or you want to engage with the presenter, you can type in the chat box. So we're there to answer your questions or anything that you have. A bit of background about Beth. We have Beth Miner as our math trainer for today. Beth is a senior curriculum specialist at McGraw Hill and has an experience of 35 years in education. I've personally known Beth and done a couple of training sessions with her. She has been a classroom teacher, curriculum coordinator, K-12 curriculum chairman, and has held several leadership positions across her career. Her expertise are elementary pedagogy, curriculum and instructions and technology initiatives. She's worked both nationally and internationally across countries. So we're really glad to have Beth join us today for this session. Thank you, Beth.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to pass over to my colleague Afsana, who is going to go over a few housekeeping slides, and then we can pass to Beth, who can then go on with the training. Thank you, Afsana.
Thank you, Sarah. Should we just double check I can be heard? My audio switched on. Perfect. As Sarah mentioned, just before we begin, we'll go over a few things just to make sure your experience during the webinar is as seamless as possible. So if you are experiencing any audio issues during the call, I would recommend just disconnecting from your computer and trying to dial in using your phone. We just find that makes it a lot easier because you're not using the internet and you tend to use your phone network, which just makes the connection a lot stronger. Of course, anything in terms of high bandwidth platforms that someone might be using in your home, that could be impacting the connection as well. So it's just something to bear in mind. However, if you do miss anything, we are recording this session and we will be circulating that recording after as well. And that will arrive within a week of today in your inboxes. And that email will also include your certificate of participation. And we will have a Q&A at the end, so please do use the chat box and the Q&A box on the side to engage with us. You probably noticed we can't unfortunately unmute you all just because of the way we have set up the webinar, but as I mentioned, chat box and the Q&A are there. So if you have comments, questions, just general queries, please do drop them into there. I am on hand on the chat box if you have any technical issues, so you can message me privately on there as well. And that's all from me, so I'll pass over to you, Beth.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we will get started right away. And I want to extend my thank you to all the participants as well. I know it's a busy, busy time of the year, so I really appreciate the time you're taking to spend with me as we look at MyMath K-5 and all the wonderful, wonderful resources that you have. And I do know it's a K-5 session, so I will be, demonstrating using various grade levels. And I think before we start, that's just one of the strengths of MyMath is the consistency in how the program is built and what the authors have done to allow for that consistency as well. And I do know that one of the things as a teacher, what we always want to know is, well, what are we going to do? So here's just a little agenda for the next 90 minutes or so of what it is that we'll do to cover the K-5 MyMath program. We've done introductions, and you can see here If you don't have your print copy of your teacher's edition, that's okay. I'm going to project images on the screen. But there are places where I have put specific page numbers by grade level if you want to turn to that specific spot and look at it as we talk about the teacher's edition and the student edition as well. Notice that the fifth bullet is the technology walk. So while I will be using screen images, I am going to go live into the digital resources for my math to make sure that you are fully aware of all the wonderful digital tools that you're going to have should, the remote learning piece or distance learning become a part of what you have to do this year. So I want to be sure that you know what you own electronically so that, again, those resources can be a part of your instruction. And I've put my email here. I am more than happy to answer any of your questions after our session today. Don't hesitate to send me an email. I'm in the U.S., and I will answer you just as soon as I get it. I'm happy to be a resource for you. So as we get started, one of the things I think we need to fully understand is that my math really does meet all the components of rigor. And when we think about that, we think about conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, and application. So I will mention these as we're looking at the program together, just how students are using manipulatives, whether they be the real manipulatives in the classroom or if you're using the virtual e-tools online, knowing that students can access them from in the classroom and anywhere they can touch a device, they can get to these manipulatives. And that's so big, of course, in that K-5 with how we're going to develop concepts in mathematics. The procedural skill and fluency, we all know these students, regardless of whether they're kindergarten or fifth graders, have got to understand the steps towards solving a problem, whether it's a word problem in a young grade or a multi-step problem in an upper grade. They have to take this conceptual understanding and move into how to use it with procedures to follow, and then, of course, building that all-important fluency, and then ultimately the application. And when we talk about application in my math, I want you to think, Sharice shared with you that I taught for a long time before I joined McGraw Hill. I was a first grade teacher for 13 years. And one of the hardest things I think our youngest students have to do is take something they've learned and transition it into application. An example might be if we're talking about a half of a candy bar. So how does that transition into a half of an hour or a half of a small group? And that's what we mean by application in my math is, can I take what I know and can I transition it into applying it no matter how I see that concept? So hard for these young students. So think about these three big components of rigor. And I want you to think as we look at the My Math materials, just how they do this for you. So in the conceptual understanding, I've pulled out how we do this in the pages that you'll see on the screen and that you'll use as you plan. One is the investigate the math, which is a part of the lesson itself, and model the math. So huge. So when you think model, I don't want you to think about just demonstrating something to students, but modeling is also, for instance, building a graph as a fifth grader or a fourth grader. It's also interpreting the graph. So these are the kinds of things that I want you to look for as we talk about my math. You'll see talk math and the opportunity for collaborative conversation. So in your classroom, whether again it's in person or if you're going to be teaching remotely, the opportunity for students to converse about a specific topic. And we call this out on the pages in your book and in the student book through talk math, positioning a specific conversation. Under procedural skill and fluency, you'll see multiple examples of how to accomplish a task. So we think it's very, very important that students know more than one way to tackle something. And you'll see it in the book. It'll say number one and then number two. And it's interesting to see which way a student will go, which strategy is the one that they embrace. The all-important fluency practice, not just building basic facts. We know that's important, but the fluency that comes from really understanding what a fact family is, for instance, and again, how to transition what they've learned into how to apply it with paper and pencil or to apply it mentally. This built-in homework. Never have to go to the machine and print homework. It's right there in the student book. We call this student book an interactive text, and that's because everything you need is right there. And that's a part of the beauty of the K-5 is that when I talk about the student book, what I'm talking about is everything they need in a lesson, including the homework. Very guided practice as well as independent practice. And then I've mentioned Redbird here. This is something your school may or may not choose to look at, but it is an adaptive technology that moves with the student so that you potentially have every student in the room at a different spot. This is an online version only. So I just mentioned that. And then, of course, under that all-important application, you've got Math in My World, letting them, this is a part of the child's actual lesson itself. Brain builders, they are what they say they are. We're building brain capacity for mental mathematics. In your learning station, you see real-world problem-solving readers that are leveled. So you have an approaching, an on-level, and a beyond level. And this is where we take literacy or literature selection and connect mathematics to it. And you'll see more of those. You have chapter projects and performance tasks. And this, again, take that mathematics and apply it. So this is the crux of what you're doing when you instruct, and this is how their interactive text is built. So what do you own? Notice on the left, in your student edition, you're going to have 2 volumes. So that would roughly be from September till about January. And again, this is an interactive write-in text. And my math is about doing it my way and having my book. And of course, this is consistent K-5. You notice in the middle of the screen, there are 2 volumes for you. So when students are in volume 1, you're in the teacher edition, of course, volume 1, and so your materials correlate. You see on the right, you should also have Blackline Assessment Masters. And I'll talk more about those assessment opportunities, but I wanted you to know that these Blackline Masters can also be used digitally. Your students can do all the assessments online. These assessments online then transition into reports for you on the data dashboard, so that if they take a test, a unit checkup online, it's going to immediately score and go into a specific report. So that's something to think about, again, whether you're going to be in the classroom or whether you're going to be teaching remotely, is that all of these assessments are featured as a digital tool. And then for your students, in each of their chapters, they're going to have a project. And think about that. I want you to think about how you set your classroom up. Do you want your chapter project to be a full day spent together as a whole group? Or would you rather break them into small collaborative groups and let them work on the project together? Perhaps you'd like to stretch the project out across the whole chapter and devote a math session a week to letting them work on this project, because the math project is using the math that they're learning in a real world format, whether it's to open a school store, make a trip to the market, a trip to a fair or a amusement park. So there are things that interest them and that they're, the kinds of activities that they would actually do. So think about how you want your project to be. Part of my math is its flexibility and your ability to take the program and make it yours and how you want it to be. Am I ready is exactly what it says it is. You're going to check to see if students are ready for the math that's coming in the chapter. It's always at the beginning of a chapter. It's in the student interactive text. Again, no trip to the machine to print things off. And it gives you just a little bit of a heads up on who might struggle with the concept or skill or who appears to already know it. And the beauty of the Am I Ready is when you see the results of it, we're going to offer in the teacher edition suggestions on how to work with students who may have a specific weakness going into the chapter. Or if you see a particular strength, it will show you how to use those enrichment activities so that you can keep challenging that student. It isn't a device that you would use, an assessment tool, to take a student out of the chapter. They still very much will need the mathematics, but it may be that you will approach it in a different way. So it's just a little heads-up diagnostic that you start the chapter with. My math words and math vocabulary cards. We all know that students are sometimes challenged by the language of mathematics. They can do the math, they just don't know what the words mean. So at the beginning of every single chapter, we're going to review math words they've already learned, and we call those my math words. And then following those will be new math words that we're adding into their collection of words. And those will be on vocabulary cards. And again, I want to point out, these are all in the student edition. They are perforated pages, so they can tear these cards out, cut them up. You might put them in a zipper baggie. So again, I'm going to put that, in your head. How do I want to use these? Where will I store them? How will the students get to them? When I was using them, I would have them in a zipper baggie, and we would periodically pull these cards out as we were working through the chapter just to review the words that we were learning. And then sometimes I'd have them sit together in a partnership and, let one student hold it up while the other pronounced the word and said what it meant. It's up to you. There's that flexibility again on how these are going to work in your classroom. Just know that you have them. Foldable. Some of you all may be familiar with a foldable. One of our authors, Dinah Zeit, is just fabulous. She creates these wonderful foldables. And they're exactly what they say they are. They fold. Again, in the student interactive text, perforated page, pull it out, they fold it. It does sometimes require scissors. And just one of those things they can use to review the concepts they're going to learn. I love to send these home. I find that the parents or the child care provider is looking at these little foldables, manipulating them with the student, and it gives the student the chance to tell that adult what they're learning. But they're fun. They fold into little booklets. They fold into waterfall little booklets, that have different words at different levels. It's just that kind of tool that you would use to introduce a concept that they're going to learn and snag their imagination, catch their attention, and give them the math one more way. And then at the bottom of that little list, I added the 3 assessments that you're going to have at the end of the chapter. You'll have a chapter review, you'll have what we call reflect, and then that performance task that lets them apply the mathematics. But as we talk about assessment, I'll pull each one of those out individually so you have a little bit of a better idea of how you want to use your assessment. Student edition, everything on this screen is in the student book. I want to remind you, too, about this page. It's Roman numeral 6 in your book, and it's also Roman numeral 6 in the child's book. What you see here is what we call contents in brief, K-5. What the authors have done is they've taken those strands of mathematics that you see here. This is grade 4, by the way. And we've isolated them and shown you how that strand of mathematics is approached in My Math, how many chapters are devoted to that particular strand. And then you'll notice the suggested days for pacing. And you'll notice that not every chapter has the same pacing. Some of these concepts are what we might call big power standards for this particular grade level. So you'll notice here in 4th grade, number and operations in base 10 has 6 chapters, but measurement data only has 3. Well, that's because the focus, of course, in grade 4 is on that number and operations in base 10. You see the number of days that are devoted to it. So again, what the authors of My Math have done is they have put the emphasis where it needs to be. And they've organized the chapters to reflect that emphasis, to ensure that as these 4th graders move into fifth grade, they're coming up with all the prior knowledge they need, all the prerequisite skills that they need for success in the next grade level. So at any grade level, K-5, if you look on Roman numeral page 6, you will see contents and briefs. What you're actually doing is you're looking at your entire school year right there. So just want you to be sure that you have that. And then, of course, as always, in your table of contents, it gives you just a 5,000-foot view of what your whole chapter is going to look like. This is chapter 1. This is place value. I want to say this is first grade. I'm forgetting, to be honest with you. But notice we always have a getting started, and that's where you're going to see that am I ready? This is where you're going to see the vocabulary. This is where you'll see the vocabulary review and the foldable. And that's when you start a chapter, and we call it getting started. Then you'll move into the lessons, and you end the chapter with your wrap-up, which is your assessment. Notice at the top of the screen, you have an essential question. I'm going to move that. Every grade level's K-5, every single chapter has an essential question. This is what you're teaching to. So as I look at this, and I'm looking at all the lessons I'm going to teach in this particular chapter, everything I'm teaching moves toward the essential question, so that by the time we get to the wrap-up, students can answer that question. So as you can see here in place value, how does place value help represent the value of numbers? So by the time my students get to the end of that chapter, they should be able to answer that essential question. The assessment revolves around their ability to answer that essential question. So, we get so wrapped up in teachers and what am I teaching? How am I teaching it? Do they know what I'm doing? Can I see what they know? Go back to your essential question, and it will always answer those questions for you. That is a big part of how the My Math program is built, which is, of course, around that essential question in every single grade level. So what do you have? I've shown you things that the students have. What do you have as a classroom teacher? Here's your table of contents. It's a little bit more complicated than theirs, isn't it? But when you look at this, it roadmaps you right on through the chapter. I can see, lesson by lesson, the vocab. If you see those hands, it looks like two hands in the air. That's showing you a very, very strong, concrete experience. I want you to think manipulatives here, whether you use concrete manipulatives or if you go online and use your digital manipulatives. So just kind of pointing that out to you. So a nice visual cue, what you're doing. So just look as your eyes scan across the screen and down the screen, how we've isolated every activity in a lesson to let you know that you are delivering what they need. You see the little gears. Now, I'll make my right here. These are called brain builders. And we put those in there to let you know that you are specifically targeting a very complex concept. You are specifically targeting a skill that is essential for them to learn. And it isn't that anything else in the lesson is, for lack of a better word, fluff, but it's really, really targeting how this math needs to come alive. And how do brain builders help me as a teacher? Well, for one thing, if I'm short on time, like you may be in the classroom or you might be in a Zoom or a WebEx lesson with students, and you're looking at how your time is moving through the lesson, and you realize you've got to cut short a little bit. Make sure you get to the brain builders, because this is the heart of what you're teaching. And we just thought that might help teachers just a little bit when it comes to time management, or in many cases, time crunch. So just looking at what you're teaching, these pages just give you such a beautiful view of what your world will be like as you teach this chapter of math. Love this. This is just, well, I've isolated components of it, and I can move them around for you a little bit so you can see it. But this is called What's the Math in the Chapter? So I know many of us used to use a GPS. I now use my phone to go anywhere. But if you think about using a GPS or a phone to go from one city to another one, it gets you there, it turns for you. If you miss a turn, it reroutes you. This is the GPS of your program, of your whole chapter. It tells you what you're teaching, and over here, what your students already know. So if this is a fourth grade lesson, it tells me what third grade standards had to be covered for them to be successful in this chapter. What will my students understand to be able to do? This is what you're teaching right here. This whole chapter revolves around this. I love how I see specific graphics I'm going to use, like this place value chart. And then it tells you, what are you going to do next? In this case, it's showing me additional fourth grade standards that will work with this chapter, and it's even showing me where my students will leave fourth grade and go into fifth. What happens in the next grade? So again, think GPS. When you look at, and this is always 2 pages long, K through 5, what's the math in the chapter? So really, you want to, that 5,000-foot view of what you're going to teach in this chapter. This is it right here. So it's a heads up for me as a teacher too, in just what I'm going to be doing. As you approach a chapter in your teacher's edition, you're just going to get so much information. And you know how long I taught. You saw them, and Cherie shared that with you. And I know what happens. We get to move it along, and we're so pleased with that pacing and all those things. And we just flip. So I get to a new chapter. And instead of looking at all this wonderful information, it's about 12 pages that starts a chapter, I just flip on through it and move to the next lesson. It's a very, I think, natural instinct to do as a teacher, just keep rolling. But if you will take just 10 minutes of your time and look through these wonderful pages the office had built, you'll be so pleased that you did, because this gives you all that fabulous heads up on, hey, use this, or don't forget you own this, and don't forget this can be used when you get to a certain lesson. And I think the thing that, for lack of a better phrase, hurts my feelings the most is when a teacher tells me she made something, and I'm like, oh, but you owned it. You already had that. So that kind of tells me if you had to stop and look for something to create something, what did we not provide for you? Chances are it really was there. When you look at the digital resources and you can see where to go to get these, you'll be glad you looked. In this part of the chapter opener, the stuff that you get before you start a chapter, there's a page called Making Connections. And this tells you about what to use in your learning station. The learning station is the folded, it stands up resource. It's grade level specific. It has games in it. It has problem solving cards. It has spinners, dice. It's this wonderful tool that lets you set up stations or centers, or you can use them with small groups, perhaps a group that would benefit from some extra skill development, or some of your high-flying students might benefit from playing some of these games. So this is telling you what to pull from the learning station to use in this chapter. And then the getting ready, love this. Each chapter has an essential question, you know that, but each chapter also has a theme. In this particular chapter, the theme is that great outdoors. So as you move through the lesson, very often the examples are reflected in the theme. So for instance, the number stories will revolve around hiking, or they might revolve around rafting down a river. So these are the kinds of things, again, that will capture the imagination of your students as well, and they're very age appropriate. Notice also there is a video. As you start every chapter, I want you to think about this in the classroom, or again, if you have to teach remotely. you can assign the video to the students to watch before you start the chapter, so that as you move into the chapter, they already have a heads up on what it's going to be about. You also notice in the getting ready, it's suggesting that you introduce the project to the students. So again, these are just those kinds of instructional suggestions about how to use these fabulous tools. And this one, notice that in chapter 1, we connect with the great outdoors, but it shows you too, you're going to talk about population. So think about place value, distances, think about measurement, and situations that involve money. So this is reflected in the problem solving and all the visuals that are a part of the chapter. So just want to give you just that kind of heads up. In the chapter project, notice it's about what does this cost? And they're comparing money. And this, of course, will be in U.S. currency, so you may want to think about conversions and begin to think about how you can use this as an opportunity to teach conversions as well. So again, don't skip these pages. They are just so good. 21st century skills like collaboration, partnerships, conversation. You know, we know we're supposed to do all this in the classroom, but the problem with that often is, how do we make that happen? I've got to get these standards covered. I've got to keep this teaching rolling. But we know that having a conversation and letting students collaborate and share their strategy is a really big part of the math we want to teach, especially as they move into those upper grades. So we're going to pull those skills out for you and make sure that you can see how this should be happening. I want you also to think about this remotely. How can you have students collaborate if they're not in the room together? And as we talk more and more, if you want to share something in the chat panel about ways that you're going to do that, that would be fabulous, and we can share that with each other as well. There's your project. Notice the gears. So again, flexibility. How do you want this to happen in your room? This does share with you in advance. It's at least 2 days. My only suggestion is, as a colleague, a fellow educator, is don't wait till the end of the chapter to do it. Because I think these can be very revealing for you, especially with your students, and whether or not they are understanding the math that they're going to use. I mentioned at the start of the chapter, you're going to do an Am I Ready? Notice this is torn straight out of the child's book. Perforated pages, again, no reason to go and print anything. This can be done online as well. In your teacher's edition, we're always going to give you the red at the top, always going to give you suggestions on how to use this diagnostic assessment. And then there's a table for the Am I Ready? And we're explaining in line item by line item each one of these. Numbers 1, 2, and 3 are about comparing numbers. Number 4 through 6, you can see. This is on proceeding from least to greatest, those things. So I can see and isolate the skills by what they miss, so that as I move into the chapter, it's going to give me suggestions on how to improve any of these isolated items that they miss as we start this chapter. And then, of course, I mentioned the vocab. So again, I wanted you to be sure that you saw the student pages. Look how bright and colorful those are. The students love them, they really do. But I'm going to share again, parents really like them too. So whether you want to send those baggies home and make sure they get back to you, I mean, you know better than I if your students are going to do that. But there are lots of ways we can get these in the hands of the parents. They can access them online as well. But notice we discussed the My Math words, which are words they're reviewing. These are not new. And then the vocabulary cards. So again, begin to think, how do I want to use these in my classroom? Okay. So just to take all that and put it into perspective, in your student edition, each of your lessons is going to be formatted the exact same way. We're going to open with Math in My World. always connecting it back to how this math works for them in and out of the classroom. And remember, in Math in Their World, you'll often see more than one way to approach a problem. The guided practice, the independent practice, always problem solving every lesson. You'll see parts of the lesson labeled with the gears that like turn. Those are the brain builders, and every lesson will end with my homework. But I want to put it back into your court as well. There are days that the homework is usually 2 pages. There are days you might start that with them and then let them finish it at home. There are days that you may let them work collaboratively and do the homework. You know your pacing, you know your students, and you know if this is something they're going to be able to do at home or if it's better that they do it in class. It is considered homework. It does communicate with your parents, but do think about that as well. And I want to show you these are actual student pages. Math in My World, labeled right there. I want you to look at this and notice these little, they almost look like playing cards. For lack of a better word, I'm going to call them tiles. Each of these tiles is a specific digital tool. So when students are working in their books, they may or may not need help. If they do, this is where they go to get that help. So if they can go online, whether it's on an iPad, a Chromebook, a laptop, whatever it is, if they're at home, they can even use an iPhone or an Android. This, the My Math digital works on anything. So this says, go here for help on this, or here, or here. And when you look at those with me a little bit toward the end of that time together, you have a better feeling for what they can do with those. But I wanted to point that out. Well, look at that. There's the essential question right there. Every lesson has it. And here's the beauty of My Math. It doesn't change. The essential question is consistent across the entire chapter. So every lesson in the chapter is focusing on this essential question and driving students towards the ability to answer it. Notice example 1, and then we see, look, one way, and it's using models. Another way, and it's using a strategy. So Math in My World gives them the perspective on how this math works. And then as we move out of Math in My World to the next page, guided practice. So you'll notice here it's giving an example. We're guiding them into how we're going to do it, showing parts of the example actually answered so that they can fill in the remainder. And then as they move through the guided practice, look, talk math. There's your opportunity right there for that collaborative conversation that we mentioned. I also want you to notice helpful hints. And we all know we can just teach our hearts out, and then we get ready to use it, and they just simply have forgotten. So we can bring them back to what they learned with a helpful hint. And then again, as students move through the lesson, these are the actual pages that I took out of the student book, the independent practice. So we move them through guided practice. Now, can you do this? This is interactive. This is the opportunity to apply what you know. Here's the beauty of this. Because this is in the book, they can flip the page back, and they can look at the guided practice and remind themselves of how to solve this problem. Notice the focus on moving towards algebra. We think it's very, very important in My Math to get these pre-algebraic skills in there early so that we can get them into Algebra 1. That is our gateway course, as you well know, into higher level mathematics. So we're going to start early, teaching those pre-algebraic skills and helping them see the connection to higher level math. We're not asking them to do algebra in the 4th grade. We're simply guiding them towards the kinds of skills they need to be successful in. So following independent practice, you'll have problem solvers and brain builders. Always problem solving. It may focus on a specific strategy, for instance, guess and check, or 4-step problems, or it may be open-ended, letting them choose the strategy. And of course, your brain builders, we really want to focus on making sure that they are comprehending the concepts and skills they're learning so that they can apply them. And I love this. We're building on the essential question. So as you know, each chapter has an essential question. I'm going to ask them a question, and I'm going to see if they can begin to apply the math they know, because this is moving towards being able to answer the question for the whole chapter. There's your homework, 2 pages, torn right out of the student book. Notice that we're going to make sure that they see the tile here. This is showing them that if they need help with their homework, go here online. These are online tutorials. These are online examples. These are online videos. And I'm going to tell you right now, parents love it. Absolutely love eHelp. Because very often, they want to help their students, they just don't know quite what to do. So again, in the classroom, it's a beautiful tool. Make sure they know how to use it. Remote learning, make sure they know how to use it and that their parents are aware that it exists. So that's very important to remote learning. That ability, to get to what you need. Notice the emphasis on practice. You know parents want to see that. They're more than happy to understand that the math we're teaching may be a bit different from the math they learn because it's more collaborative, it has more conversation. It's an opportunity to use alternative strategies, but they want to know their students are practicing. So sending these home is very important. There's problem solving. We all know the importance of getting that in, and there's your brain builders. There's also, notice here, online, there's a vocabulary check. Here is the online vocabulary. If students don't have the cards at home, they can click on this. It will take them over to the glossary. The beauty of this is it will read the word to them if they cannot pronounce it. It will read the definition to them, and it will give them an example of how to use the word. So you've got some fabulous tools here, especially if again, the remote learning is a big part of that. Now, that is what I would call a regular lesson. The majority of a chapter is your regular lesson. But in every, I'm going to say it again, in every chapter, you're going to have a full lesson devoted to problem solving. Now, you just saw in that student edition that there is problem solving embedded in the lesson and in the homework. So we're keeping problem solving right up there at the top of our list of importance. But we do know students have to learn problem solving strategies. They have to understand that often one strategy will work for a problem that another strategy won't work for. So what the authors have done is they have isolated specific strategies to actually teach. So again, I've taken this straight out of the child's book. A problem-solving lesson moves through these steps. Learn the strategy, practice the strategy, apply it, review it, and the strategy is a part of the homework. I want you to also notice the problem-solving lesson revolves around the essential question. So everything is tied together. It's beautifully woven. So each of those parts of the lesson is given a full page. So you have practice the strategy. The strategy is introduced to the student here. They're given the opportunity to also write about it. So I want you to think about the reading, writing, mathematics connection here. Then the opportunity to actually apply it and ultimately to review it. So this serves as a little hint for you as to whether or not they have embraced what you just taught them about problem solving. And of course, the homework will revolve around that as well. And then as you approach the end of your chapter, and if you have a really long chapter, you could have a chapter that's 13 lessons long. If it is a huge power standard or a huge power concept, and you have a particularly long chapter, the authors will put in a check my progress about halfway through, just so you can stop and say, hey, do you know this yet? So look for those in your table of contents. You might have 2 in a chapter, you may have 1. But it is exactly that. It's just a chance to stop, just to see, are they embracing the vocabulary? Do they understand the math that I'm teaching? And then as you get to the end of a chapter, you will always have a review. Always have a chance for them to sit back, look at the math and say, I know this. I got this right here. It will always involve the vocabulary. There's your tile. It will always involve a concept check. And then it will always have brain builders so you can see if they can use and apply the mathematics. So you have that review. If you want to score this, that is completely up to you. But it truly is designed to be a review so that before you give the actual end of the chapter assessment, that you may want to stop and look at this and see if there are any students who might be pulled into a small group, or if there are any students who need some clarity about a concept, or if you just want to be sure that a couple of them are ready for the assessment. That is the intent of review. And this is the big assessment at the end of the chapter. It doesn't look big, but it's big in its power. This is where they answer the essential question, and it's called a reflect. Each of the reflects is different. They're not cookie cutter. They are a different way of offering the reflection to a student. This is a very empowering task to be able to ask a child, what do you know? Tell me how you know it. So in this reflect, notice the question is in the middle. How can equivalent fractions help me add and subtract fractions? They can write an example. They can connect it to the real world. They can show me how this question is answered through an estimate and by using any of my vocabulary. And then they actually attempt to answer that question. I will tell you, as a teacher of my math, I'm often blown away by what some of these students write. It just astounds me how they can connect with what they've learned, how they can tell me in their own words and draw pictures, and just be reflective. And it's very empowering for me as a teacher to know that they know the math more than just sitting down and taking the test, that they can actually reflect on how they've learned something and then share it with me. And again, I want to emphasize the flexibility. How you do that is completely up to you. This can all be done online, but remind yourself, this reflection cannot be auto-scored. This has to be looked at. Each one of them needs to be looked at, and you need to apply your knowledge of what you've taught them to how you evaluate this page. So it's a different way of assessing, but you have so many assessment tools. It's just one piece of the pie. And then you have the performance task. And notice here, this is about training for a triathlon. And, again, sometimes these are going to take more than one day. Flexibility here. How do you want to do this? Do you want to do it in small groups? You want them to collaborate? This one has the part A, B, and C. And it says here, show all your work to receive full credit. So they have to show the mathematics that they use to solve this. Everything connects back to the essential question. So again, think about this. You have one for every single chapter. I'm going to show you that you have some backups too if you want to use more than one. In some chapters, but not all, you have fluency practice. The authors have put fluency practice in the chapters where it's most relevant. So I just wanted you to be sure that you knew that you did have some of these. And then this is the 5-part lesson structure for you and how you're going to teach all this math you just saw. So let me just move through this not quickly, but I'll make connections to what you just saw. In your teacher's manual, across the top of your page, you see these, they look like screens from an iPad. This is your pre-built, hold on, I lost the word. This is your pre-built presentation. I couldn't get the word out. We built a presentation for you, but you can edit it and you can customize it to you. And as you open each lesson, you're going to see focus, coherence, and rigor, emphasis on the vocabulary, and it all connects back to that presentation. Notice that part 2 is building conceptual understanding. Again, we show you where it is in the presentation. Notice the hands. That's modeling. We're talking concrete or virtual manipulatives here. And then as you progress through, you're in part 3, which you've moved to the practice part of your lesson. You saw that in the child's book. Notice Math in My World. When you see red, these are anticipated responses by the student, which sort of lets you know you're having conversation. And then, of course, here's your presentation. Notice this red right here. This is a formative assessment built into the lesson. The students don't see it, you see it. This is telling you, you can assess this part of the lesson, and they would never even know they were being assessed. It's just one more way that you can build that assessment puzzle. And then, of course, building on the essential question, everything that you saw in the child's book is detailed for you in your teacher's edition. And then notice here, apply. So we've moved to the problem-solving piece, and there are the brain builders. Here's another formative assessment if you want to use it, completely up to you. And I want to point out that in part 4 of the lesson, you're going to see a whole page devoted to differentiation. And you'll always have these offerings. You'll always have approaching, on, and beyond. These are built for small groups, and each one of these is a hands-on activity. And notice the authors are suggesting about the amount of time it would take to do this. So what this is those small groups. So let's say you did this a formative assessment and you saw 3 or 4 students that appeared to be struggling with something on the page. It could be that you're going to do this approaching level activity. Beef them up. Give them another opportunity to learn it. And then, of course, you notice there are Blackline Masters for you. You can get those online and print those out. Again, it's completely up to you as to how you want to use those. At the bottom of the page, you're always going to have differentiated English language learner support. Again, 3 opportunities: bridging, expanding. The approaching, the bridging, and expanding bridging. But I will tell you this as an experienced educator. These are just good activities for anybody, not just those students who are learning or, trying to incorporate the English language into what they already know. So think about that. Look at these when you're planning your differentiation. And golly, I have 2 or 3 students who would benefit from that activity. Very often, as I mentioned with vocabulary cards, it's not that they can't do the math. It's just that sometimes they don't understand the language of math. So offering them this could be exactly what they need. So just want you, that's always after part 4. And I want to pull out one of the formative assessments just to show you. Look how easy this is to do. This is centered around place value, and it's another formative assessment that helps me just develop my whole assessment picture. And I'm just pointing out for you just that each one of these, is a hands-on activity involving the manipulatives in your room or the manipulatives you can point them to remotely. So again, these are, after part 4. So there's the emerging, the expanding, the bridging. This is oral language. This is acting it out, and this is a number game. So think about that. Even students who, again, are not ELL learners or don't need ELL support, here's a new game that you could teach a small group of students who are struggling with place value. So you have all of these fabulous tools at your fingertips, okay? For those of you who do have your print materials with you, these are the pages that you could look at to see the problem-solving lesson that I've already mentioned, just so that you can see those components of the lesson, just a little bit different from what we might call a regular lesson. Now, in your teacher's edition, we're going to walk you through exactly how to embrace that strategy. Look at the conversation here. Getting students to talk about it. And then, of course, as they move through it, having them learn the strategy and ultimately practice it. I want to point out, too, that we've put down here levels of complexity. What this lets you do is actually use the check part of the lesson, but at level 1, it's just about conceptual understanding. In level 2, it's about applying. And in level 3, it's about extending. So what this lets you do is, perhaps with some students who are struggling, you might only do the conceptual understanding. For students that appear to have the concept, but you want to do a double check, you might assign them just exercises 1 through 4. And for some of your students who appear to have embraced the strategy and have, want to move on, you could just do 5 through 8. It's one more way that you can level your instruction to meet extensive needs of your students. And then, of course, here's the application of the strategy. But what I really wanted to point out was in your teacher's edition that even in problem-solving lessons, you're still going to have, after part 4, you're still going to have all those fabulous differentiation opportunities embedded. And then wrap it up. Even as you are in a problem-solving lesson, you're always going to have homework. You're always going to have the opportunity for brain builders. And then, of course, think about communicating with your parents here. Really gives them an opportunity to see how you're developing. So as you come to the end of that chapter and you look at doing the chapter review, again, here is a table guiding you into, if I want to know who can do expanded form, who can do place value, who can order numbers. These are big NBT standards. This is where I look. And this is where it is in my review lesson. Here's where I can go for intervention support. Look at that right there. My teacher's edition is giving me guidance in exactly how I want to support my students before I ask them to exit a chapter. So much that you can use. Again, the reflection, your teacher's edition is going to guide you through how to explain this to the student and get the best from them when they use it. And in your assessment masters, you have a variety of additional tests that you can use. You have benchmark tests for every 9 weeks. You have additional Am I Ready? You have chapter diagnostics. Notice here, this is a vocabulary test. This is away from the child's interactive text. This is one that you can print or you can assign it online for them to take online. Notice that it's asking for extensive explanation of how you know this is an oral assessment. So these Blackline Masters are going to give you a variety. So these are the things that we just went over. I'm going to go online in a second. But before I do, I want you to think about what you just heard about. I explained the contents in brief, looking at your whole year. We talked about what's the math in the chapter. Beginning of every chapter, that's your GPS. Those folding learning stations that have games and problem-solving cards and spinners and dice. That's the chapter project, and I challenge you to think about how you want to use it. You saw differentiated instruction, always after part 4 of the lesson, and multiple levels to form small groups. You saw English learner differentiated instruction on those pages as well. You saw that you have problem solving in every lesson, but you also have a problem solving lesson in every chapter. You saw that you have built-in formative assessments throughout the lesson in your teacher's edition, and that you saw that one of the means of assessing your students is to challenge them with a performance task, which is also a part of your chapter, typically 2 days. So think about what additional questions you may have that centers around what you just saw. And if you want to put those in the chat box, we'll look at them in just a second. This is the learning station that I mentioned, and it's grade level specific, so it should indeed be relevant to the lessons you're teaching, to your central questions. And you also saw in your teacher's edition specific games that you should play with this particular chapter. Notice that the learning stations can differentiate instruction, and then, of course, we're telling you in each chapter exactly which things to pull out and use that are relevant to the concept. This is great for setting up centers. In the learning station, you have what we call real-world problem-solving readers. And you'll see them like this. You'll say, well, my goodness, I have 6 of these. Well, that's because 2 are approaching, 2 are on level, and 2 are beyond level. And if you turn them to the back on the cover, it will even tell you the lexile, so that if you're doing any kind of reading assessment where a student is assigned to a specific fluency level, you can know which of these you want to use. They all revolve around the same concepts and skills, but they're at a different reading fluency level. Again, the gains. Do notice in your learning station you have a booklet, and this is your teacher's guide on how to use this resource. Also know that these games are, of course, in math, and you're going to use dice, spinners, any kind of random number generator, but they can also play the games online. Think remote learning here. And then, of course, these are what we call the activity cards, and these don't start till, I believe, grade 3. And these are just that. They're activities to apply the skills in mathematics. If you're in the classroom, they're a lot of fun to do in small groups. If you're remote, you can assign these for students to do perhaps with an older sibling at home. And the same is true. Grades 3 through 5, you have problem solving. And this is about looking, for instance, with this one, this is about looking at penguins, where they live, different kinds, and then how it connects to the real world, challenging them to find the continent that you might find the most penguins. Or, if the penguins can dive and stay underwater for 4 minutes, those kinds of things. How long can you stay underwater? Again, it's capturing those kinds of things that just, the imagination of the students. They love hearing about these things. And I want to point out the Math Masters. You can see better on the front here just what kinds of additional assessments that you have. Notice the quarterly benchmarks. There's standardized test practice. So before you get to high-stakes testing, are they familiar with multiple choice? Are they familiar with short response? Those kinds of things. So please be sure that you look at it, because there are additional chapter tests that are leveled so that you can give the same test to every student, but at different levels of reading comprehension. There are tests that don't require them to have to read the instructions. There's all kinds of ways that the authors have built these assessment masters to meet the needs of every student so you can learn what they know. All right. The 21st Century Assessments are an online tool. These have performance tests in addition to the ones that you already have in your teacher's book and in the child's book. Benchmarks, I love this one. If you're giving a high-stakes test in the spring, you can start 20 weeks out with something every single week that is building on their assessment skills, right? Online, you have an interactive guide. It has scaffolded instructions for some students who are just not grasping the strategy. English language acquisition, guided writing. Again, I'm going to show you these online in just a second, and it's going to help you see what you may want to use. But here's just one word of advice. Don't try everything right away. Get into the teacher's edition. Start, with your chapter 1. Use the tools that I've mentioned to you, and then gradually add some of the things that you're going to see now. So let me go. Hold on just a minute. I'm going to have to go out of here and go to, hold on.
While Beth is working on this, I just want to let everyone know that if you have any questions for Beth so far, please let us know, and you can type them up in the Q&A box, and we'll be able to take them towards the end of the session. So if you have any questions, anything that she has covered so far, you want to ask again, you've missed a piece, or generally, please feel free to ask us questions. We'd like to keep it more engaged. Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry about
I'm trying to get to my, okay, hold on.
I think that we can see your screen. It just says that it's sharing content.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just going down to Chrome. There we go.
It's still not showed up though.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to get you back, I promise you. Oh, now it went back. Oh, there it is. How about now?
Yes, we can see your screen. Connected.
You seen Connect Ed?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. I'm just going to scroll down and I'm going to just notice here, I'm going to go to grade 2. I've seen a lot of stuff in 3rd and 4th. I think we'll move to grade 2. I've logged in and you will have a login and password from your district, from your school. So I just wanted you to see the opportunity. I'm using our McGraw Hill demo site. So notice here, I'm on my math, but I can click here. I'm going to do that again so you can see where I went. I just clicked here. It lets me go to any chapter and any lesson. So if I click on number patterns in the 2nd grade, hold on, I didn't check on the lesson. It's probably going to tell me I need to log back in again because I've been offline for at least an hour. Yeah. So you can usually stay online about 120 minutes, all right? So I'm opening this now, and this is going to take me to a video. Right, I want to go back. Excuse me. I apologize. I've been offline for so long, I think it wants to play with me. All right, so by clicking here, I can go to any chapter. And I want to suggest to each of you on this that you go to the program resources and update. This is just a quick way to get to any of this. Fluency Practice, the teacher guide for the learning station. There are your virtual manipulatives. Here's the parent letters. So you can get to anything by simply clicking here. So I'm going to go to chapter 2, and I'm just going to go to lesson 2. I'm doing this randomly. So what it's always going to show me is the chapter video. Here's one. We're going to the desert. That's a good one. So the whole chapter is going to revolve around that theme. And I want you to notice in chapter 2, lesson 2, that I have this carousel here. And when I click through it, I see all those little tiles. Remember the tiles that we saw? I can go to, this one is the response to intervention, more, which would be additional worksheets and things. But I can click through and I can get to anything for this lesson just by going here. It lets me isolate as my assessment. But I want to be sure that you see the presentation right here. We have a presentation built for you for this lesson. And when it appears on the screen, I want you to notice it's in order of the lesson I've just shown you. So that as it's loading, you can see it's going to start with the very first slide that would introduce the chapter to the students. But if I go down here, we call this the waffle view. If I click that, it lets me, as a classroom teacher, see every single slide. And I can see all the answers, so I can project those with the students. Notice it follows the entire lesson org, all the organization, as well as the differentiation. Okay? Notice it identifies all videos, so I can show those to the class, or I can ask the students to look at them online. So you have a full presentation already built for you. And I just wanted you to realize, that you had that. Again, there is flexibility with this. In most cases, when you are in the presentation, if you want to change it or add something to it, you can customize this. So just wanted you to be sure that you knew that you had that. I'm going to go out of that. I'll go back. One thing, I can go here, chapter and lesson, but see this? We call this the hamburger menu. Have you noticed at McGraw Hill we talk about food a lot? We have a waffle and hamburger. At any point, you can go back to Connect Ed, This is your class management, where your students will be. I can click on resources, and it takes me over to everything I own. Now, I'm in Chapter 2, Lesson 2. Look at what I own. In this Chapter 2, Lesson 2, I have 1 check, I have 1 assessment, I have 2 e-helps, I have 2 lesson presentations, I have 20 response to intervention options. I have Geometry Sketchpad. These are web sketches. I have my virtual tools. I have 1 video. This is not the chapter video. This is perhaps like this video here. I have 9 worksheets. That's 1 lesson. You're not going to use all these things. The beauty of it is you have them. So this is about equal groups. It's a fabulous little video. It walks them through what you taught them. If I go to this gear, notice I can open it. I can get the details. I can see the standards. I can assign this resource. If I click this, it lets me push it out to the student to watch, so that when they log in from the Student Center, they will see this assignment to watch this video. Love it, love it. Your parents love it. If you're using Google Classroom and you prefer to keep everything there, simply push it over there. All you have to do. So just wanted you to know what that gear will do for you. Notice again, you have a hundreds chart, same criteria. If I want to push this out and let parents print it from home, if you're teaching remotely, you might want every child to have one of these at his or her, kitchen table if that's where they're going to Zoom. So many ways. Look at the sheer number of resources. We're talking 1 lesson. So again, I want you to think about how you want to use these resources. There's the homework. Notice in the homework, we don't have the chance to push it out, the answers out. So just those kinds of things. Again, here is the chapter video. You can download this to your desktop. If you're concerned about your internet connection, you can download this. I just wanted you to be sure that you knew you had all this. It is a challenge to see and understand all these fabulous tools. I want to click on eTools for just a second, and I want you to see you have this, they have this on the student side. But when I open eTools, okay, the idea behind eTools is the concrete manipulatives that you use in your classroom transition into a digital tool. Now, that doesn't look like anything, does it? Don't be fooled. And make sure that when you use these with your students, you demo how you got to it, so that when they go into it on the student side, they know how to access what you're going to access. I'm going to go down here to eTools and click on it. Look, I'm in grade 2, but look, you have access to every grade level. So if there's a tool from first you'd like for them to use, you have the ability to go backwards and you can add it. These are listed in alphabetical order. There's your calendar builder, the calendar. If you're teaching remotely, I want to go back to that, especially I'm targeting my K-1-2 teachers here. Doing the calendar is a huge part of students understanding patterning, sequencing, number order. It does so many things. So if you're teaching remotely, building your calendar here and doing it with the students remotely is yet one more way you can ensure they're still getting those calendar skills that they really need. Notice they have all the counters and dice, the dice roll, fraction circles, teachers in the upper grades. Notice how even the low grades have access to all of this. Again, I just want you to see how they're listed alphabetically. And they're just, well, I'll just show you. Look at these base 10 blocks. They show up at the bottom. And then I click on it and I simply drag. And it appears there. If I want 2 of these flats to show up, I can do how many? I have 1. I can have 10 show up at one time. And again, doing this in front of the students is huge. But notice this. I'm clicking on this. You see the hammer? Decomposing numbers. I can break that down. Think place value here. Think about, I want them to understand that that flat is 10, 10. So we can skip, I can put a box around it, and I can click on it, and I'm not getting it. There. Come on. It puts it back together is what I want to show you. I'm not right on it. These are the kinds of things that if you demo it, they will understand how to use it. So I can go here, and it will ask me, you want to clear my objects? Yes, I do. And then I can have a clean screen. These are the kinds of things that the remote learning piece is going to be huge for you. It really is. So just wanted to make sure that was a part of what you were doing with using these fabulous tools. At any time, click All Resources, and the whole panel will come back to you of every single thing. Now, that's one lesson. But let's go right back here. I'm going to scroll down, and notice that in addition to each chapter, I also have all of these tools for me, the classroom teacher. Here are additional lessons that revolve around project-based learning. These are additional projects away from the ones in the child's book. Professional development. If you would like some of the things that I've just talked about, I know I tried not to go too fast, but if I did, here are fabulous videos that we have built for you. This Quick Start course takes you through every digital tool that is in this particular website. So if you want to go back, and none of them is more than 5 minutes, and you want to look at how to use the assessment builder, guides on how to use the gameplay, how to use your data dashboard and get those reports going, those things are all here under professional development. But I do want to be sure to point out, if I go to program resources, the very first thing, it's still in implementation, getting started is here, but look at all this. An overview of the learning station, how to use that e-toolkit, enrichment workbooks. I mean, this is everything you could possibly touch. Let me remind you of how to get here. I am in the very first, all right, if I scroll down a little bit, I think it will help. I am in the very, very first thing, which is program resources. I'm not in a chapter. And then under that, I can choose what do I want to see? Which of these resources do I want to see? And I can look at, these are the boosters. I can't, work maps. Think about remote learning. How could you use these work maps? So that's one. All right, we'll go back to the menu. Remember, the hamburger menu takes you to everything you own. So if I go back to this hamburger menu and I click down, I want to be sure that you see plan and present before we end our time together. Just one more minute, and then we'll see about those questions. If I am in chapter 1, and remember we were in 2nd grade, apply addition, subtraction concepts. Here is all of the information on getting ready to teach this chapter. This is what we looked at in the teacher's edition. It's formatted a little differently, but it lets me plan online. So if I don't have my teacher's edition, that's okay. I can go to chapter readiness. It has everything that I want right here. All the diagnostics. Here is anything that is available to me electronically, always shown here on the right. We talked about flexibility. See this word customize? If I click here, this lets me customize any part of my lesson plan. If I want to add a game, maybe you went on YouTube and you found this fabulous video. I don't know if you've ever seen the Fletch videos, but they're wonderful. And you'd like to plug it in here. Go ahead. You have the ability to do that. So you can customize your lesson and you can customize your presentation. So I wanted you to be sure that you knew that. If you would like to go in and actually add a lesson, you've worked in your grade level for years and you have a lesson that's just your favorite, put it in. We don't want to take away your ability to customize and use your materials the best way that you know how. So as we look at this, I just want you to see that you have an entire section devoted to assessment. As I close, I want to remind you, all of your assessments are online, and I wanted you to know that you can manage this and manage your assignments. I use the word push this out to the students. So if you push something out, you simply make an assignment, you give the date range for when it's due, and you can create a discussion thread where the students can talk to each other, and then you can attach, for instance, a resource. You can attach a video that you want them to watch or whatever, and then you can send them a message. The idea, once you've done the assignment, the rationale behind this is when you go here, you will see who has done the assignment. You see in the tracker, you'll see a little check mark, and it will tell you to go in there and look at it. You can see who's finished it. Think about your parents here. Think about remote learning and the ability to get materials that you want the students to have into their hands. Please go in and play with this. You cannot hurt it. You cannot hurt it, I promise you. Start clicking around. Find out what you own and how it works. Not only for in-class use, but also for all the times that you want to use this with your students remotely. We're challenged by remote learning right now, and I think what you've seen today is that you have this fabulous array of resources that you can use should that be the case for you. Notice the ebook. This is always, always the student book. It is not the teacher book. So you can click on this, and the ebook, the child's book comes up. You can demo in it. You can write in it so that students can see how to do the mathematics. It is a fabulous tool. You can show one page. You can show 2 pages. It has so many features. If it opens, yeah, we got 3 minutes. I'm not going to keep you over, I promise. So once you're in the ebook, you can do a lot of things to it so that you can use it as a means of demonstrating something in remote learning as well. One page, there's a button too. I'm waiting for it to load. Look at this, on off. I can turn on the answers so that if students have done their homework, you can turn it on and it will demonstrate what the answers were for them. It's a great way to check together. Again, if you're doing remote learning. Again, here's your, this is what turns the page. So I can open the book, turn the page. This lets me zoom in so that they don't see the whole page. You have some students, especially a young one. So if you want them to just see a portion of the page, then I can just do that. It enlarges, and they just see what I want them to see. Think about how you want to use this, because it's a wonderful tool, again, for what you may or may not have to do this year. And whether it's in-class use or whether it's going to be out-of-class use. And don't forget, when you make an assignment, it will show up here. And you can always put other class events, whether it's going to be a guest speaker or a field trip or those things. So this becomes a fabulous means of communication. And it's 9:28. Sharice, do we have any questions up here?
Yes, Pat, we've got a couple of questions that have come in. Thank you so much for your questions, everyone. And if you have any more, please let us know and we can cover these now.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got 3 questions for now. Can all the videos be downloaded, the extra ones as well as the chapter videos?
I'm going to ask you to, when you go back onto ConnectEd, go there. If you'll touch the gear, the majority of them are downloaded, but they're also visible from the student side. So it may be that you won't need to download them. But yes, I would say the majority are downloadable to your desktop, and then you can push them out as an assignment.
Great. And then is the assignment tracker used to track all the work assigned to students or only the assignments?
Only what you assign them.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the last one that we have here is, where can I find Assessment Master in the McGraw Hill website?
The assessment masters will be here. You know, when you go on to your specific lesson, So you, like, if you went to chapter 1, and then, lesson 1, they will be in your resources. So all the assessment masters that you also have in print will also be in those resources. So if I go to chapter 1, lesson 1, and I scroll down, I can go to, see, here's the practice, review, and reflect. And if I go to, hold on just a second, it will be in the lesson itself. So when I go here and then I go over to all those fabulous resources for that particular lesson right here, they will show up in all the materials. They'll show up here. So see, there's the e-check and the e-help. Those, notice the little check mark that indicates it's an assessment. So it will be over here in all of these. And all I have to do is click on the here, and it will ask me if I want to download it. If I open it, and then I can save it on my desktop, or I can assign it as an online tool. So they will always be in your resources.
Perfect. And we've just got one more question that I've received. It says, can you type the answers on the ebook or use a visualizer to write on it? It's not always easy to write numbers using the computer mouse.
Yes. When the students open the ebook, at the bottom they can click, and they can click on the writing tool, or they can click on the keyboard tool. And the keyboard tool will let them type the numbers in the response, or type their words into the response as well. So yeah, all right, I know we're 1 minute over, but if you would let me just, and those you have to jump off, I understand. I keep referring to the student side. I'm going back over, and I'm going to just click on the first grade student edition. And I want you to explore this. So, just because, notice how much it looks like what you have. So see how there's their video. So you don't need to find the video. There it is. Notice they have the same little tiles that you do. So they can get to all those things, and you won't need to assign it to them. Here's their ebook they can write on. So they have access to all of this through the student side as well. But if you make an assignment, as soon as they log on, just the way that I did, it's right here. So they can see it the minute it comes up. You could say, you have an assignment right now. You need to watch the video, and notice here's the e-help. Look at the e-help. And then, again, these are things you won't have to do. In the e-help, it's taking them over to the toolkit. So you don't have to assign those things because it's already given to them. Does that help?
That's very clear to me, and we hope that was clear to everyone. And thank you, Nadine, for those amazing questions that you had. They were really useful, and I'm sure that it was useful for other instructors as well.
I hope so. And don't hesitate. You have my email address. Don't hesitate to, to email me. I would love it. And there's a second site that I think some of you might, let me see, I think I put it in here. No, must not have. Oh, there we go. All right. There is a website. You can get to it through Facebook. I think you can also get to it just simply by Googling it. It's called Build Math Minds. It's fabulous. It's teachers like yourselves all over the world communicating with each other. They're talking about remote learning. They're talking about, well, I have a fifth grader and he's really struggling with place value. And it's just been very eye-opening for me to see teachers express what they're struggling with, what they've been successful with, and then sharing. And it's called buildmathminds.com.
Do you have the link, Beth? Can you share it on the screen? I'm sorry, I took the rights over.
I thought I had put it in the deck, but I don't see it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't see it here. I thought I had put it in there, but we'll look and see. No, must not have. I apologize. I thought I had. So just, again, I'll say it's Build, B-U-I-L-D, M-A-T-H-M-I-N-D-S. It is just, I'm not advocating for a program or, or a publisher. This is about educators talking to educators. And I think I just enjoy reading it, and just how candid educators are being about they're struggling with, keeping distance in the classroom. So how they're setting up their rooms, how they're having small groups, and how they're handling sharing manipulative things that we're struggling with right now. And then remote learning is a big topic on it right now. So I just, I'm always about go to the professional development in my math and look at some of those videos that McGraw Hill has built for you. But when I find something good, I like to share it. So thank you all. I apologize I kept you a couple minutes over. But good luck. Have a wonderful year. And don't forget to email me if you need any help at all. And thanks, Sharice. Appreciate your help.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, everyone. You can stay in touch with us on our social channels. That's on the next slide, Beth, if you could just change for me, please.
All right.
Okay, great. We're there.
Right.
We have a repeat session tomorrow, by the way, in case you've missed out on something or you want to go over anything. So we have a repeat session tomorrow. I'm going to drop the link in the chat box so you can have a look at it. And there are other back-to-school support resources and sessions that we're running along side by side. So feel free to register for as many as you want. Yes, if you have any questions, please let us know. As my colleague mentioned, we will be sharing the recording of this webinar, and you will have the option to download your certificate within a week's time. So wait for that email in your inbox, and see you soon. Thank you for joining us today.
Bye-bye.
Bye.